we were talking about New World and Old World wines. So I think I've explained pretty much everything, the most differences that are there. A lot of people ask me, are there any differences in taste? I think I was just studying the other day for Spanish wines, and they said that there's no problem with, old world wines or new world wines or how they're different from each other. It's just that wine should express where it is from. If I'm drinking a French wine, I should feel that it is from France. It should express. You would hear this word a lot when you get into this industry called terroir, Terroir, right? So terroir is basically the sense and the expression of the place. It's about the soil, the weather, the climate, the microclimate, the winemaker, the processes, everything, the sense of that place. So unless you drink a wine and you get a sense of France or Spain or Australia where it is from, that is not a, a good wine unless it expresses the place. Primary difference. The other thing is service of wine. Could you all mute your So the other thing is service and storage of wine. Now, if I was with you, I'd probably show you how to open a bottle of sparkling wine, how to open a bottle of. Sula doesn't make any wines with a cork. We only make the wines with a screw cap. So screw cap, I think I can just show you, although this is open. So basically, a lot of people try to open the screw cap like this, right? So you can actually hold it from the bottom, the neck, and twist it. So when you twist it, this part breaks the seal, and then your cap becomes loose, and you can easily open it. That's how you open a bottle with a screw cap. Sparkling wine is slightly more tricky. One, it has a lot of pressure because there's, just imagine there's gas trapped in this wanting to come out. Okay, so a sparkling wine would have a cork. Over that, it would have a wire cage. Over that, it would have a foil. So there's three levels of sealing in a sparkling wine. So basically, first you remove the foil, and then you loosen the wire cage. All the time, your hand stays on the cork. Okay, so your hand doesn't come off because just in case the pressure is too much, as soon as you loosen the wire cage, it's just going to blow up. Your face is here, it can blow into your face. If it can, hit a customer, hit the ceiling, whatever. So always the hand stays here. You loosen the wire cage slightly, and then you just gently twist the bottle, and you will feel that the cork starts to loosen into your hand. It has to make very, very minimal noise, especially in a fine dining setting. It's not supposed to be shaken and popped. Okay? So that's about opening them. What about service of wines? What temperature should you store your wines at? What temperature should you serve your wines at? For storage, the wines that are not in your wine refrigerator, but they're in your cellar, in your backup storage, in your L17 or whatever, they will be stored at a temperature not more than 15. So you can't have your wine storage at a terrace outside in the sun or wherever. It needs to be a cold, dark place, never more than 15 degrees. Um, I always tell people, think about wine as a person who's sleeping. Okay? A person who's sleeping does not like light. They don't like to be moved. They don't like too much sound. So you need to keep your wine like that. Of course, the wines with cork need to be stored like this so that the cork stays in touch with the wine, stays moist, and stays swollen so that it's blocking any air from going in. Screw cap can be stored vertically, horizontally, tilted, whatever you prefer. Service of wine, it is it's going to be very hard for you to remember, temperature for each and every wine. So use logic. I follow this thumb rule that the more acidic the wine is, so very acidic wines and very sweet wines, you put them in the same category. It's a dessert wine with a lot of sugar, or if it's a very dry wine with a lot of acidity, they both need to be served absolutely chilled. It starts with 6 to 8 degrees, but I would say, even chill them to 4, 5 degrees, because by the time you pull it out of the ice, you open it, you pour it in every glass, and they have it, it is going to come increase in temperature by a degree or two anyway. Okay, so very acidic wines and very sweet wines, absolutely chilled. And then as the acidity starts to decrease in a wine, your temperature can start going up. So start with 6 to 8 degrees, and then a little less as acidic, a little colder wine. You can probably serve at 8 to 12 degrees. And then your red wines, the most important question, can you serve them at room temperature? There is nothing called room temperature. Room temperature varies from room to room. Even if there were something called room temperature, it does not refer to Indian room temperature. It's their French room temperature, which has been written in some books. Okay, our room temperature in summers is 40 degrees, 42 degrees. So we can't serve our wine at that temperature. Why I am saying use logic is, say if you are having fresh lime soda with a lot of lemon, okay, you have it at room temperature, you're not going to like it. But you can have something very acidic if it's slightly chilled. It's going to feel better. Similarly, Coke, if you have it at room temperature, it feels way too sweet and very flat. But if you have it chilled, it tastes very crisp. Similarly, with Logic, sparkling wines, very sweet wines, acidic wines, absolutely chilled. The other thing with chilling your red wines is, and I would say even your boldest red wine, even if it's like a Bordeaux, I would say should not be served at more than 20, 21 degrees, because it will come to room temperature by the time they enjoy it, they swirl it and they smell it. The other reason is when your wine is hot, alcohol starts to evaporate very, very fast, and alcohol evaporates faster than water. Okay, so if your wine is at 24, 25, or if your room temperature is 42 and you've not chilled it, so when you're swirling it and you're smelling it, right, the first thing that's hitting you is alcohol and nothing else. It's taking over all the delicate aromas that people are supposed to enjoy in that 5,000, 10,000 rupee bottle of wine. If they've ordered an expensive wine and it's at room temperature, it's just going to spoil their experience. Okay, so make sure you chill your red wines as well. And you always store your wines in a cool, dark place, away from light, away from sound, with a little bit of humidity. That's about storage and service of wine. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I've literally covered everything. Anything you want to ask me? Food and wine pairing is another topic, but I think it's a very complex topic to do over a video, because I would want you to experience tasting a piece of cheese with your wine, tasting a piece of olive with your wine, tasting some salt with your wine. But I will nonetheless take you through the basic principles of wine and food pairing. First of all, there's too much hoopla made about it, but still you will have to go with it because people buy it. If you do a wine and food pairing dinner, people are going to buy it, because wine is still not seen as something which you probably go home at the end of the day and just have it. It's not as casual as beer. It's still seen as something which is slightly more premium, experiential, and yeah, so you need to do that. The basic rules to remember are, if your wine is acidic, your food needs to be less acidic than your wine. Otherwise, your wine feels flat. So for example, I'll give you, if you're having a somtam salad and you're pairing a white wine with it, and there's a lot of acidity in your somtam salad, your white wine needs to have more acid than that to stand up to it. Otherwise, it starts to feel watery. Think of this: when you have tea and you have a biscuit or a cookie with it, if you've had a bite of cookie, your tea suddenly starts to feel less sweet, right? Because your cookie is sweeter. Your palate is always adjusting to what you eat and what you drink. If you're eating something more acidic, it's expecting more acid to actually kind of feel something. So that's why your wine and food need to kind of be balanced that way. The other thing is, if you're pairing wine with a dessert, I think the dessert will need to be again less sweeter than your wine. Wine has to be sweeter than your dessert. Otherwise, wine feels very flat. Bitter wines should not really be paired with bitter food. If people like, Karela is somebody's favorite, of course, it's their choice, subjective. But basic rule of thumb. Very alcoholic wines, sometimes with very spicy food. So if I'm having, say, a chicken chettinad with a lot of chili and a lot of spice, and by logic, I should be pairing a bold red wine with it. But if my wine is 14% alcohol, the alcohol also produces heat and chili also produces heat. So heat and heat, I think, is just going to overpower your palate and you can't, really taste like anything. But again, some people prefer that. So wine and food pairing is very, very subjective. And as a sommelier or as a restaurant manager, whatever, it is going to be your unique experience that you're going to give to your customer based on what you recommend. So if you want your people to experience wine pairing with a soup, which is kind of odd, hot soup with cold wine, but that's the experience you're giving, and I'm sure the customer is going to remember it. So it depends on you, and I think it's best that we do it in person. But those were some of the basic rules that I think you could remember. Yeah, I think that's about wine and food pairing. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that Sula has just come up with the wine in a can. So wine is not just available in bottle now, also available in a can. It's called Dia Sparkler. You can probably look it up on Facebook or Instagram. So Dia was a wine which was semi-sparkling, already being made in India, and it was one of our more economic wines. But now we've launched it in cans, so it's 8% alcohol, slightly sweeter, fruity, very easygoing, easy drinking. Basically, to make wine accessible. I have met people who said we don't drink wine because we don't have a wine glass. So essentially, and if you really see people who have wine drinking as a part of their culture, they often don't really use a wine glass. They probably use something like this for a regular table wine with a meal. If you can use a wine glass, of course, great. But it's not an absolute essential. So just to make wine more accessible, casual, a part of the conversation, we've launched the wine in a can. Of course, wine in a can is available all over the world. But in India, it's the first wine in a can. There's wines available in cardboard boxes also now. So the same pack that you get for chayos with cardboard box, and it's lined with plastic and probably um, waterproof film inside. So that's also available, but we're not launching that yet. But wine in a can is available, and I think you should look it up online and probably know something about it. Yeah. Girish, anything else you want me to cover? I think from the top of my head, I've kind of covered all bases.
Uh, Thank you, Hina. Now I would like students to come up. They may have their
Yeah.
queries, so
Yeah.
they must feel free to come up now. Yes,
Okay, everyone.
students.
Any questions? No question is,
Yeah.
मैं तो ऐसे करूंगा
Please
Pankaj,
mute.
are you chatting with me?
Please come up with your questions. You can chat later on maybe with your friends.
Yeah, it's Akash here. I have a couple of questions.
Please,
Hi,
Akash.
Akash.
Yeah, as you said, like from a region called Burgundy,
Mhm.
a white wine is produced from Chardonnay grape. Is it from all the regions that they produce it from a particular grape only, or do they produce it from all the grapes?
Okay, so if you see France, I mean, France has so many regions and sub-regions, and each region has a unique grape variety that they grow and that they use for winemaking. Maybe 5% or 10% of that wine would be, local indigenous grapes, but primary grape variety remains the same. So, for example, if it's Bordeaux, now, Bordeaux again has about 30 sub-regions, which is subplots. And when the French talk about it, so they will say, so suppose, like your hotels, your plot, they will say, in this one, I have gravel. and in just outside this plot, my soil is chalk. So in this plot, I will grow Merlot. In chalk, I will grow Chardonnay. So they are very particular about what kind of soil in each plot they have and what kind of grapes they grow. So naturally, they have different grapes in different regions, but those regions are very popular no matter how small they are. So if in France you see the popular regions, you have Burgundy, right? Now, north of Burgundy is Chablis, which is just white grapes. Then you come down, you have your Pinot Noir. Then you go to the south of Burgundy, which becomes your region called Beaujolais. And there is a grape called Gamay, which they grow. Because they say that the temperature from north to south, now, if you really look at it, Burgundy wouldn't be very big. I mean, I think it would be smaller than, say, Dwarka or Kapashir, I don't know. But just that length, they say from here to here, even by 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers, the temperature has changed, the soil has changed. So they grow different grapes on those different plots, and the regions are very different. So you have Chardonnay, then you have Pinot Noir, then you have Gamay, then you come down, you have Bordeaux, where you have Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And Bordeaux also has left bank, which is the river, and left side of the river, and the right bank, right side of the river. So say the left bank will grow more Cabernet Sauvignon, and the right bank will grow more Merlot. They blend, and all of these have popular houses. And most sommeliers, once you get deeper into it, you will have to learn all of these plots. So you will have to learn कि Burgundy के left side में 20 plots है, किन 20 plots में कौन सा grape है, what wine comes from there. So it's a very detailed study. But yeah, I hope, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And I have one more questions also. Like, how do you judge the quality of a wine? It is from
Okay.
the is it from the taste or from a region or from a grape?
Right. Interesting. Okay. So, um, interesting question, and it doesn't really have, a particular answer. But how do you really judge a quality? So, say for example, there is fruity and there's maza, right? Both are made from mangoes. I don't know what's the price difference between both, but some people would prefer a fruity and some people would prefer a maza. Similarly, Coke and Pepsi, right? So basically, even if it's Cabernet Sauvignon, and India might be producing a Cabernet Sauvignon, Australia might be producing it, or even in India, if I say I am making a Cabernet Sauvignon and Growers is making one and Fratelli is making one, right? We all claim we make the best one, but it's really upon the customer. It's really what sits on your palate when you drink it and you feel right about it. But as a sommelier, when you have that duty of putting, if 100 samples come to you, you can only put 20 on your menu. I think what I use is, okay, this has come from this region, and I already know what to expect from this region. So, for example, if I say this Chardonnay is from France, right? What do I expect from a French Chardonnay? Okay, so is this wine giving me what I expect? Check. Is it worth the price? Can I get similar quality in lesser price? Right? Are they just charging for their name, or is it worth it or not? So again, the price again will be one point. And then certain things are just popular because of their name, and you have to sometimes put on the menu because they're so popular and people will just ask for it. So yeah, it's very, very subjective, but I think, is it worth the price is probably a good question to ask yourself while putting it on the menu.
Yeah, and ma'am, on what factors like you can decide this wine is from Italy or this wine is from France? Like, what are the major factors?
See, when you have to decide that, that has to only be decided in a blind tasting, right? And blind tasting is sort of I don't know. It's like something for the sommeliers to do, something that they enjoy, something that they think is kind of precious and
Did it come
privileged.
from the experience?
No, so how do I explain it? So say wines from France or from the old world. particularly from the colder regions, right, will tend to be more restrained. Whereas wines from the hotter regions will tend to be more bold and more aromatic and more tropical. Now, think about the same grape. So the same grape, if it grows in the north of France, it will give you aromas of lemon, green apple, pear, okay, unripe yellow green fruits. But the same grape, if I take it to a hotter region, will give you aromas of peaches, pineapples, tropical fruit, mango. Okay, it changes expression with temperature and region as well. So I think that is one way to tell. First of all, so when a wine has been given to me, I don't know where it is from. I have not seen the label. So when I smell it, first I look at what kind of aromas am I getting. Are they more restrained? Then automatically my head goes to maybe it's from a colder region, right? If it's like very bold and aromatic, then my head automatically goes to, okay, is it from a hotter region, right? And then you kind of deduce. So it's about practice. And in practical terms, I don't think you really need to guess because it will be on the bottle, whether it's from France or Italy or whatever. But if you want to start guessing, I think it happens with practice, and a lot of factors will tell you where this wine has come from. And a lot of drinking, of course. A lot of drinking.
Okay, so experience does matter a lot. Okay.
Experience absolutely matters. You know, wine education is one thing. We can learn the theory, we can learn everything, and of course, it's very, very important. But I think, you know, if you see a lot of wine critics in Delhi, and if you really study know the Wine Society of Delhi, people who write about wine have often not studied wine certifications. They've just come about experiencing wine. And a lot of popular people say we've spent too much time talking about wine rather than drinking it. You know, talking about wine is for people like us who will have wine jobs and who will probably sell wine or promote wine. But for normal people, it's an experience, and there are connoisseurs who have, I don't know, crores worth of bottles in their houses and they just drink wine. It's about the more you drink, the more you experience, the more you remember. And when I say drinking, it doesn't mean you have to gulp down every bottle. You know, tasting is actually sipping and spitting, right? So you don't have to actually get drunk.
Okay, so ma'am, being a Somalier, what are the first things that comes in your mind when you taste a wine? Like, yeah, this is a good quality wine. Is it the taste or the aroma?
Aroma, for sure. Because I think with sommeliers, what happens is we tend to get a little more, a little too excited by everything. And I think it's an experience you will start to feel once you get into this industry. You know, somebody pours you a glass of wine, and you will not even think about taking a sip. You will start looking at the color and start thinking, okay, is this wine old? Is this new? How old is this wine? And then you will smell it like two times, three times, four times, and try to mentally guess already what the grape is, where has it come from, right? After that, you taste the wine and you actually tell, okay, am I right or am I wrong? So aroma is, of course, absolutely very, very important. And you do this experiment at home, you know, put a clip on your nose and try to drink different things or taste different things. You can't really tell the difference. So aroma is very, very important. And like I think I always encourage people, there is not enough people in this industry. Please go ahead, get a certification, study wines, and it doesn't have to be wines. If you are interested in spirits, you can get an education in spirits. In spirits also, there's not too many people. I've been seeing the same faces as brand ambassadors for literally every company. I have not seen newer faces. So until you guys go and get an education, and it's not very difficult, you know, you can just start with a WSET diploma, a WSET level 1, level 2 perhaps. It's good to get you in the industry. And it's an interesting field because a lot of us studying hospitality just think, you know, of becoming a restaurant manager or an F&B manager, or which are of course great jobs, but there are prospects in the industry where there's just no people taking up jobs. So think about it.
Uh,
Thank
can
you,
I
ma'am. Thank you.
can I can I just stretch the query a little bit more, Veena? Akash, I'm
Yeah.
just touching upon your point. I would just like to stretch it a little bit, as Hina has pointed it very accurately, the initial impression which is through in the form of aroma. But by the end of, by the time, the overall impression a sommelier will perceive, the overall assessment of wine will determine. So there could not be any one standout parameter on which a wine could be evaluated entirely. There would be multiple parameters, and the overall assessment will be put out from the sommelier end as an overall assessment of a wine, and that will give you better or holistic assessment of a wine. Second thing, I just wanted to touch upon the previous question in which you raised how it will be evaluated or identified a wine is better or how it is to be judged. If we go by the history, if we look at the Italian history, Super Tuscan were very, they were not known, in fact. They were very lesser known. Then there happens to be this blind tasting, and Super Tuscan came victorious. Super Tuscan came with flying colors. And then they claim we do not even require your appellation. Now, whatever appellation we have, we are contented with that. And they commanded the better price than the other better appellation. So it could be a turning point when we talk about blind tasting. There could be chances a very lesser known wine will come up as a super kind of wine, like the case of
Absolutely.
Super Tuscan can be taken over here. Now Super Tuscan does not require any kind of recognition from any of the appellation. They have set the standard so high just because of their performance in the blind tasting, and it's a recognition across the globe now. Over to you, Hina.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And I think, again, like that incident, so just like Super Tuscans weren't recognized, even American wines weren't recognized. So, and now US is, one of the largest producers of wine in the world. So there is a man named Steven Spurrier. I don't know if you know him or follow him. And he had a wine shop in France. And this was in 76. And he knew that, French people were just selling wine in the name of France. People were just buying French wine. Not everyone was maintaining the quality. So there is something called the Judgment of Paris. And he put a blind tasting with the panel, which had more French people. And he put American wines and French wines against each other. And the American wines actually came out better. And that's when the French realized that they have to pull up their socks and actually improve the quality of their wine rather than just relying on their name. So yeah, I think that's another interesting incident. So of course, like these things have obviously happened in the world which have changed the course of wine history. So again, rely on your palate. I think it's very, very subjective. Yeah, any other questions?
Yes, any student having any other query, please come up. So I shall presume there is no more queries now. Okay, Naveen, and you want to ask anything? Naveen, and unmute yourself, then you can speak up.
I don't think he's able to unmute himself.
Actually,
Yes, now you can speak up.
Hi, Naveen. Can't hear you.
Yes, ma'am. Now can you?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. I want to ask this question, ma'am. Actually, how we get to know the body of wine, ma'am? Like a full body or medium body or light body?
Okay. So body is basically the thickness of wine. There are a lot of things which contribute to the body of wine. Primarily, it could be alcohol, sugar, and tannins. These are the primary things which contribute to the body of wine. Of course, when you taste something, when you sip it, like if you were sipping water, you would get to know it's very thin. If you were sipping skimmed milk, you would get to know it's slightly thicker. If you were sipping full cream milk, you'd get to know it's slightly thicker, right? So it's obviously the weight of that liquid on your tongue. But when people talk about in tasting, so basically they swirl this glass. I'm sorry, I don't have a wine glass right now. And there's something called legs and tears. Now, it's kind of redundant, not everyone follows it, but the slower the liquid trickles down, the bigger, the bolder the body. Okay, why? Because if it's thicker, obviously it's going to go down slow. If it's very light, it's going to form like water droplets like this. So basically, that's the body. It's the
Okay, ma'am.
thickness, viscosity of the liquid.
Yes, ma'am. Is there any alcohol different between the New World wine and Old World wine? As a alcohol difference,
Not
ma'am.
not necessarily, but yeah, oftentimes it happens because a lot of old world does happen to be in a slightly colder region. So they would be slightly lower in alcohol. In New World, of course, if you take regions like Argentina or if you take Southeast Australia, they're very, very hot regions. So obviously, when the sugars in the grape are more, you have more potential to convert them to alcohol. So more sugar, more alcohol. So yeah, New World can be sometimes more alcoholic.
Than Old World wine.
Yeah. But
Okay.
again, if you take like northern Italy and southern Italy, again the difference would be there as well because colder and hotter. So I think it's got to do with the temperature.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. No other questions?
I think Shivam Negi is willing to have one of the last queries of the session. Yes, Shivam Negi,
Okay.
you can go ahead with your question.
Shivam, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi, Shivam.
Go ahead, Shivam, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Shivam.
Yes, Shivam.
Yes. Good afternoon, all of you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Actually, ma'am, I have one question.
Yes.
Approximately, how many calories in a glass of dry wine?
How many colors? I
Calories.
didn't
No,
get your
ma'am.
question.
Calories. How many calories in a standard
Calories
of
are
glass?
really hard
Yes,
to
ma'am.
say. Why do you have to worry about calories when you're drinking?
No, ma'am. I want to start.
Okay. Yeah, I think this question comes to me a lot. Does wine make you fat? Does alcohol make you fat? Which alcohol has lower calories? So I think one, it would depend on the sugar, the residual sugar in the wine. But again, alcohol also imparts calories. So yes, wine will have calories. Red wine tends to have lesser calories because red wine's always, less residual sugar, more tannins. And yeah, than white wines or sweeter wines or rosé wines. But
Okay.
I
Thank you,
can't
ma'am.
tell you for sure how many calories does it have. Never counted them.
But ma'am, approximately.
I don't know. Honestly, just look it up. Like, look up. There's so many wines. How do I tell how many calories does it have? So sweeter wines will have more calories. Just remember that. More the sugar in a
Okay,
wine,
ma'am.
more calories.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiva.
Can I ask one more question, ma'am?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
Shivam,
Ma'am, from
just
yes,
wait
sir.
for a minute, please. We are about to disconnect again. So,
Okay.
do we need to resume again, or I can?
It's your call, Girish. Absolutely. Shivam, if it's a question about calories, you can Google it. Otherwise.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. So, if there are any other questions, please feel free to just like write me an email, and I'll be happy to kind
Sure,
of answer all the questions.
we'll do that.
And yeah, and thank you so much, everyone, for being present and listening to me. And use this time to kind of brush up your knowledge, study something, learn something new. And I'm always here to help.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye
ma'am.
bye.
Very
Take care.
wonderful
Stay
session.
safe.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.